Very good evening, my dear friends. My dear friends, yesterday, that is on 9th May 2023, Ministry of Finance, Department of Revenue has come out with an important notification for the purpose of Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. This is a notification which is issued following up the notification which was issued on May 3rd, wherein the Ministry of Finance, Department of Revenue brought CA in practice, that is Chartered Accountant in practice, Cost Accountant in practice, and Company Secretary in practice for the purpose of Prevention of Money Laundering Act under Section 2, Subsection 1, Subclause SA, wherein they said certain transactions, about 5 transactions were mentioned in that notification, and accordingly they said that the professionals who are dealing with this transaction with the clients broadly has to report those transactions to the as per the requirement to report or liable to report under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Following up this notification, the Ministry of Finance, Government of India, following up this notification, Ministry of Finance, Department of Revenue, following up this notification, Department of Revenue, Ministry of Finance, Government of India has come out with the latest notification yesterday, that is on 9th May 2023. The notification number is SO 213 SO 2135E, SO 2135E, wherein I quote, they mentioned that in exercise of the powers conferred by subclause 6 of clause SA of subsection 1 of section 2 of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the central government hereby notifies that the following activities, when carried out in the course of business, very important, following activities when carried out in the course of business on behalf of or for another person, as the case may be, as an activity for the purpose of the said subclause, namely 1. Acting as a formation agent of companies and limited liability partnerships. 2. Acting as or arranging for another person to act as a director or secretary of the company, a partner of a firm, or similar position in relation to other companies and limited liability partnerships. The third important transaction which is added, item which is added, is the providing a registered office, business address or accommodation, correspondence or administrative address for a company or a limited liability partnership or a trust. All the three entities are covered. That is company, 2, limited liability partnership, even the trust is covered. The fourth aspect is covered under this notification is acting as or arranging for another person to act as a trustee of an express trust or performing the equivalent function for another type of trust. And 5. Acting as or arranging for another person to act as a nominee shareholder for another person. About 5 aspects are covered under this notification, which clearly says that, for example, if you are acting as a formation agent, wherein you run a platform and then you connect the company secretary, chartered accountants to incorporate company and limited liability partnership, that formation agent platform also is covered now under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. 2. For example, many of the professionals like chartered accountant, company secretary, cost accountant, advocates, they provide their office for address as a registered office for the companies wherein the business activities are yet to be carried. Even that activity is covered. However, in this notification, there is also an exception which is provided. So I would like to quote that exception as well as part of the explanation. The explanation is very clear. for the removal of doubts. It is hereby for the removal of doubts as part of the explanation under this notification. It is clarified, I quote, for removal of doubts, it is clarified that the following activities shall not be regarded as an activity for the purpose of subclause 6 of clause SA of subsection 1 of section 2 of the Act. Namely, A. Any activity that is carried out as part of any agreement of lease, sublease, tenancy or any other agreement or arrangement for the use of land or building or any space, and the consideration is subjected to deduction of income tax as defined under section 194I of Income Tax Act 1961. The B covers any activity that is carried out by an employee on behalf of the employer in the course of or in relation to his employment. So that is employee-employer relationship is also excluded from this notification. Any activity that is carried out by an advocate or a chartered accountant or a cost accountant or a company secretary in practice who is engaged in the formation of a company, to the extent of filing a declaration as required under clause B of subsection 1 of section 7 of the Companies Act 2013, they are also excluded from this notification. Wherein the very important thing to be noted here is declaration as required under clause B of subsection 1 of section 7 of the Companies Act 2013 is clearly excluded from this notification. Then any activity, D, any activity of a person which falls within the meaning of the intermediary as defined in clause N of subsection 1 of section 2 of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002 is also excluded. My dear friends, it is very important to decode this notification. As we look at this notification, we all understand certain activities are now brought under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Broadly, to summarize what are the activities that has been brought in, as per the notification issued, that is notification SO 2135E, which I read now, broadly the activities covered are that is formation agent of companies and limited liability partnership. 2, for example, if you are acting to provide you are acting as a director or a secretary of a company or a partner of a firm or similar position in relation to other companies and limited liability partnership, that activity is also now covered under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act as part of section 2 subsection 1 clause SA. My dear friends, it's very important. These activities are now covered under the definition section of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. The third important activity is also covered is, like for example, many of the professionals, when the client come to us for registering a company, many of the professionals, what they do who are in practice, generally they provide their own address for the purpose of registering a company on behalf of the client. That activity is also now coming under section 2 subsection 1 clause SA. So that means these activities also are supposed to be reported to the Ministry of Finance, that is Department of Revenue, Government of India. So that is going to be the liability. There is a liability to report this transaction, report this activity under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. The fourth important thing is, for example, if you have consented to act as a trustee of a trust or performing the equivalent function of another type of trust, wherein equivalent to that trustee, role of a trustee, that is also is covered under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act as per the latest notification, wherein you are supposed to report that kind of activity, those kind of activities also to the government. The fifth aspect is acting as a nominee shareholder for another person. For example, usually there are many persons who act as a nominee shareholder for another person. That activity is also now covered under this notification. So my dear friends, broadly, any activity that you carry out as part of these entities, that is company and limited liability partnership, on behalf of your client. Earlier notification which came on May 3rd covered about 5 transactions very clearly. But now the notification which is issued on May 9, 2023 covers activities where you do on behalf of your client. 5 broad activities. But however, there is also a clarification which is also issued as part of this notification. We can take this clarification issued as part of this notification even for May 3rd notification which was issued by the Department of Revenue, Ministry of Finance, Government of India as part of Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002, wherein they say, for example, if you have part of any agreement of lease or sublease or tenancy or any other agreement, that activity is excluded. 2, any activity which is carried out in the employer-employee relationship is also excluded as part of section 2 subsection 1 clause SA. So that means it need not be reported as such because it's an employee-employer relationship. The third important aspect, which is also a clarificatory or explanation for the notification issued on May 3rd, wherein they brought CA in practice, CMA in practice, company secretary in practice under the ambit of Prevention of Money Laundering Act as part of section 2 subsection 1 clause SA, wherein they have provided an exception. For example, if there is a CA in practice, if there is a CMA in practice or a company secretary in practice who is filing a declaration form on behalf of the client with respect to formation, creation of the company or the entity, like for example limited liability partnership, those activity need not be reported to the need not be reported under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. My dear friends, one more exception also is provided wherein there is no requirement for reporting is the intermediary as defined under section 2 subsection 1 clause N is also excluded as part of the notification. So here broadly we have to understand what is the liability. Earlier May 3rd notification came out with 5 transactions and now May 9th notification which we now understood also as an activity which is listed here. What is the obligation or a liability for the persons mentioned in this notification? The liability is nothing but what we can what could be the development that can take place because the Government of India to comply with the Financial Action Task Force, wherein they are going to come and check the compliance of our country. The Government of India hurriedly is implementing, is in urgency to implement many of the recommendation of Financial Action Task Force. But however, we have to understand these transactions have to be reported, or this activity broadly about 5 transactions and 5 activity which are brought as part of these notifications has to be reported to the Financial Intelligence Unit. The question here is whether the Financial Intelligence Unit first of all is adequately staffed, then there is a code of conduct for respective professionals with respect to client confidentiality. The question here is whether is it not compromised by reporting all this transaction to the Financial Intelligence Unit. Then third aspect is what is the forms through which the same need to be reported. It doesn't seem to be only KYC of the clients, that is know your client details alone to be reported, but also even the activity being carried out as part of the entities are required to be reported apart from the transaction which was covered in May 3rd notification issued by the Ministry of Finance as part of the PMLA, that is the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So it as though looks like you, that is the professionals, company secretary, chartered accountant, cost accountants, all the people who are carrying on the activity who are covered under May 9th notification seems to by default or deemed to be a reporting entity to the Government of India, that is the Ministry of Finance, Department of Revenue, wherein PMLA Act, under the PMLA Act the requirement comes into picture. Now to whom the transaction to be reported is the next question. So what we can understand from the Financial Action Task Force is that the professionals have to report to Financial Intelligence Unit. Now the question here is, after reporting this transaction to the Financial Intelligence Unit, what will they do with this transaction in the first place? 1. 2. For example, let us assume there is a chartered accountant who is involved in creation of the entity. That chartered accountant, while he is creating that entity, he may not even know what could be the future transaction that is going to be carried out by that entity. So this is going to be really a tough time for the professional to assess what could be the future transaction. So second thing, there are in many cases the statutory auditor who is doing audit is a different person, and there is a different CA who is in practice, and many of the times the person who incorporates the company is also another CA who is in practice. In this situation, the person who incorporates a company may not know what could be the potential transaction that will be entered by the client. Ideally, now anybody who wants to incorporate a company, let's assume there is a CA who is incorporating it, who is holding certificate of practice, ideally should be their statutory auditor. Otherwise, they will not even know what is the transaction that the company is going to enter, for which the person who incorporated the company is also liable under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, because he is covered under section 2 subsection 1 subclause SA. So considering this, there is going to be a transformation of the entire professional's responsibilities and liabilities because of this change brought in under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. To enlighten this, try to decode this notification. In the days to come, I am going to provide various clarification with respect to this act, that is the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. My dear friends, it's a pleasure catching up with all of you to enlighten all of you about this new notification which is brought on May 3rd and May 9th by the Ministry of Finance, Department of Revenue, Government of India under section 2 subsection 1 subclause SA. My dear friends, this notification has a great impact and a huge impact on the profession. So that is the reason I wanted to provide this clarification to all of you. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll touch base in another video. Thank you so much.